Bolivia's movement towards socialism's presidential and vice-presidential candidates held their final campaign rally in the city of El Alto this Wednesday. For the first time, a clergy sex abuse trial opened in the Vatican's criminal tribunal this Wednesday. South Sudan's government and the National Salvation Front have signed a ceasefire agreement. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. The movement towards socialism's presidential and vice-presidential candidates held their final campaign rally in the Bolivian city of El Alto on Wednesday, just 3 days before the country's general election takes place this Sunday. Our correspondent, Camila Escalante, brings us the details.
I'm in the city of El Alto. There are thousands of people behind me at the 16th of July market. We are waiting for the candidate and vice presidential candidate for the movement towards socialism to arrive here. They should be arriving any moment now. Thousands of people are waiting here. The stage is completely crowded to every side, and there are a lot of local candidates here as well as people from around the country who have traveled here to see the final mega rally event before the campaign closes. Of course, for 3 days before the vote takes place, the campaign events and campaigning in general must come to an end. So this will be the main final event before the 3 days of campaign silence ahead of the vote that will take place on Sunday.
Thank you, Camila. And speaking at the closing rally of his presidential campaign in the Bolivian city of El Alto, the movement towards socialism's presidential candidate, Luis Arce, noted that the majority of the population supports his candidacy due to the social and political situation the country has experienced over the last 11 months.
The Bolivian people are aware of what we are going through. There was once a time in October last year when a lot of Bolivian men and women let themselves be influenced, let themselves be carried away by stories, and today we have no democracy. 11 months have passed, and we are in a deep economic crisis.
Likewise, the movement towards socialism's presidential candidate assured that the movement will address the economic recovery of the country so that Bolivia can recover the social and economic indicators it enjoyed during the government of former President Evo Morales.
When we took office in 2006 with Brother Evo, we also found a broken country, a country that had no future, a country that had no money or resources. And we worked day and night, long hours, risking our lives to move the country forward, and we did it. We had the best economy and social indicators in the history of the country, and today, sisters and brothers, we have the same challenge because they are going to hand over a broken country, a country without resources. We are going to work and we are going to once again take the country forward.
And this Wednesday, Bolivia's plurinational Legislative Assembly approved a motion of censure against de facto Minister of Government Alto Murillo, who failed to attend a hearing on alleged irregular purchases of tear gas to be used by police forces. The motion was approved taking into account Article 158 of the Bolivian Constitution and implies the immediate dismissal of the minister of the coup-born regime led by Janine Áñez. The case against Murillo is related to his involvement, together with the de facto Minister of Defence, in the acquisition of riot gear for the police in November last year. According to the accusations, the company Bravo Tactical Solutions LCC, based in the United States, brokered the deal to purchase the equipment after the de facto government had suspended the direct negotiations taking place with former supplier Condor, thus making the purchase more expensive at over $5 million. The Assembly approved a motion of censure against de facto Defence Minister Luis Fernando Lopez in March this year for his role in the Sencata and Sacaba massacres, but de facto President Janine Áñez has maintained him in the post. Meanwhile, the Legislative Assembly has also summoned the Minister of Education, who must respond over the closing of the school year, and the Minister of Health for an inflated purchase of 170 ventilators. In Colombia, the killings of social and indigenous leaders have increased by 33%. The data was disclosed just hours after the confirmation of the assassination of an indigenous governor's son. According to Somos Defensores, or We Are Defenders, a Colombian non-governmental program that produces an annual report on such attacks in the country, in 2018, 24 indigenous leaders were killed by armed groups who continue to threaten indigenous communities, causing widespread displacement. The latest killing was of the son of a governor of the Senu community in Bajo Cauca in the department of Antioquia. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador called on local authorities not to interfere in the regional elections to be held on Sunday. In his morning press conference at the National Palace, the president called on citizens of Hidalgo and Coahuila to participate in the vote, but to freely choose their representatives without interference from local governments. He urged political parties and their candidates not to continue the practice of vote buying and to end the despicable practice of handing out food supplies and trafficking in the poverty of the people in order to get elected. The president called to enforce the right to a free, secret vote and stressed that the polls should not be altered or hijacked, calling on polling station officials to act with impartiality. A Brazilian federal court has called for the dismissal of Environment Minister Ricardo Salles to be analysed immediately due to his mishandling of extensive wildfires. Previously in June, the Brazilian prosecutor's office also requested the removal of the minister, arguing that he encouraged the dismantling of public institutions and regulations that seek to prevent environmental crimes. Judicial authorities of the Regional Federal Court of the First Region stressed that if the minister was not removed, the alarming increase in deforestation of the Amazon rainforest could reach a point of no return. In September, the prosecutor's office insisted that the current policy of the Jair Bolsonaro government implies tragic consequences for environmental protection. Representatives of different Honduran campesino organizations announced that they will carry out demonstrations to protest the approval of a decree they say will heavily impact on national farmers. The new decree has been criticized by rural activists as it awards plots of land to national and international private investors. According to rural workers, the decree represents a step backwards from the agrarian achievements made in recent years. It also encourages the surrender of land, which is now cultivated by domestic rural workers, to the highest bidder. The campesino movement has presented an appeal claiming that the decree is unconstitutional before the Supreme Court of Justice. Governor of Puerto Rico, Wanda Vázquez, is set to undergo a self-quarantine period as a precautionary measure after learning that her health secretary, Lorenzo González, tested positive for COVID-19. According to the governor's spokesperson, Vázquez is asymptomatic and will continue to work remotely. The governor held a meeting with the health secretary on Tuesday to discuss possible changes to the government's executive order on the COVID-19 response, which includes a nightly curfew and a nationwide mask mandate. Meanwhile, the governor has tested negative for COVID-19 twice since arriving from New York on Thursday last week, where she met with US officials to discuss Puerto Rico's coronavirus response. Health authorities reported 490 new coronavirus cases on Tuesday, taking the total number of confirmed infections to over 27,000. Cuba is readying to undertake a monetary overhaul, which will include the unification of its two national currencies, a new exchange rate, salary and pension hikes, a new set of fixed prices and changes to the state subsidy system without neglecting the most vulnerable sectors of society. Cuba currently has two currencies, the regular peso, known as the CUP, and the convertible peso, or CUC, which was introduced in the late 1990s as an equivalent to the US dollar when the US administration imposed punitive measures preventing the island from using its currency. The dual monetary system has resulted in a heavy burden for the Cuban economy, according to government officials, who said the time has come for it to end. Meanwhile, the new prices and the minimum wage have been estimated according to a basic basket of goods, which will include subsidised products and others, while the new exchange rate of the CUP against the US dollar will take into account the country's financial reality in order to ensure it is not overvalued. The newly announced economic strategy also considers centralised planning, market regulation and a boost to domestic production. For the first time, a clergy sex abuse trial opened Wednesday in the Vatican's criminal tribunal. The case concerns the closed world of the St. Pius X Youth Seminary, which serves as a residence for boys aged 12 to 18 who serve as altar boys at papal masses in St. Peter's Basilica. 28-year-old Reverend Gabriel Martinelli is accused of abusing his authority on molesting an altar boy using violence and threats from 2007 to 2012. Former seminary rector Reverend Enrico Radis is charged with having helped Martinelli avoid investigators by claiming that the victim's allegations were baseless. Neither Martinelli nor Radis have responded publicly to the accusations. The next hearing is scheduled for October 27th, when both defendants are expected to take the stand.
I saw violence, made through blackmail and abuse of power by Gabriele Martinelli, and it was terrifying seeing these things, because at the time I was 15. I had never seen two people having sex, and yet I was forced to watch these things inside the Vatican. Psychologically, it was pretty tough to take because I came to the Vatican to serve the Church. I was a strong believer.
I see this as really verification of the fact that the Pope is cracking down very hard. He changed the law to make it possible for prosecution of this kind to be done not in the church tribunals, but in the Vatican City state tribunals.
On Wednesday, the Chinese Foreign Ministry described Canada's arrest of the chief financial officer of Huawei, Meng Wanzhou, as arbitrary detention and coercive diplomacy.
We express strong dissatisfaction at the Canadian side's obfuscation of facts and repeated wrong remarks, and strongly oppose these. We have already lodged solemn representations to the Canadian side. Until now, Canadian government is still afraid to face the facts described earlier, and afraid to tell these facts to the Canadian public. It is a show of hypocrisy and weakness. The Canadian side's conduct regarding the Meng Wanzhou issue is a typical case of a real arbitrary detention and coercive diplomacy.
French President Emmanuel Macron announced a nighttime curfew for the Paris region and 8 other French cities, starting on October 17th, in order to curb a sharp increase in COVID-19 cases. The curfew will be introduced from 9 p.m. until 6 a.m. and will be in place for 4 weeks. Meanwhile, there will be no new restrictions on public transport or travel between different regions, and people are free to go on holiday. Noting that the imposition of a national lockdown would be disproportionate, President Macron called on the population to respect health recommendations that set a maximum of 6 people at a table for private gatherings, which also applies to restaurants. Meanwhile, France has experienced an average of 20,000 new COVID-19 cases a day, while the death toll has climbed to over 33,000. Russian President Vladimir Putin announced on Wednesday that Russia has registered its second COVID-19 vaccine candidate, with a third already on the way. Having granted regulatory approval, a Phase 3 trial of the vaccine with 40,000 volunteers is due to begin in the near future. Russia was the first country to announce the registration of a COVID-19 vaccine in August, which has been given to thousands of Moscow residents and is currently midway through its final trial phase. The new vaccine candidate is named Epivac Corona and is being produced in Siberia by the State Research Center of Virology and Biotechnology, which has one of the world's largest collections of viruses, including Ebola, SARS and smallpox. According to Deputy Prime Minister Tatyana Golikova, 60,000 doses of the vaccine are due to be released soon, and the volunteers participating in Phase 3 clinical trials will include people aged over 65. Thus far, just 100 volunteers have been injected with the vaccine candidate. 2 Russians and 1 American have departed for a 6-month stay on the International Space Station as part of the first mission to use cutting-edge technology that will slash the journey time to just 3 hours. The ultra-fast journey time is shorter than a standard Moscow to London flight. The 3 travellers took off from a launch site in Kazakhstan just before noon local time on Wednesday, riding aboard a Soyuz spacecraft. Later in the day, the Soyuz capsule carrying the space trio safely docked at the ISS. Russia's Roscosmos agency celebrated the mission's success, uploading images that showed the spacecraft approaching the station's port at minimal speed. The German health minister has sought to downplay fears about mandatory coronavirus vaccinations, saying compulsory jabs are unlikely to be necessary to contain the spread of the virus. Health Minister Jens Spahn explained that German authorities are targeting an overall immunity of 50 to 65% of the population, which would be sufficient to contain the virus. He also said that the goal will likely be achievable through voluntary vaccinations, and that widespread COVID-19 vaccination is likely to begin in Germany in the first quarter of 2021. He also reported that over 1 million people were tested for the coronavirus every week in Germany. On Tuesday, over 5,000 new cases were reported by German health authorities, representing the highest number since April. However, testing capacity has greatly increased in the interim, which might explain the figure. A Greek court on Wednesday handed a 13-year prison sentence to the leader of neo-Nazi group Golden Dawn for ruling a criminal organisation disguised as a political party. The fascist group's founder, Nikos Michaloliakos, received an additional year for illegal possession of weapons. The court also sentenced 5 former members of his inner circle to prison terms on the criminal organisation charge. The sentence included current independent European Parliament member Ioannis Lagos. Greek judicial authorities must send a request to the European Parliament for Lagos's immunity to be lifted. The court also gave a life sentence to the Golden Dawn member who murdered anti-fascist rapper Pavlos Fyssas in 2013, the act that sparked the investigation into the neo-Nazi paramilitary group. Police in the English city of Liverpool dispersed a large crowd of revellers gathered in the street late on Tuesday ahead of stringent new measures to be enforced in the city. Video released on social media showed large groups of people singing and chanting in the Concert Square area of the city, surrounding a police car with flashing lights. Liverpool has been put on the highest alert under England's new 3-tiered system of coronavirus restrictions. The new rules came into effect on Wednesday, shutting down bars, pubs, which do not serve meals, gyms, betting shops and casinos. South Sudan's government and the National Salvation Front announced the signing of a ceasefire agreement in Rome under the auspices of the Catholic Association, the Community of Sant Egidio.
What were the results of this meeting? It was the commitment of the parties to the ceasefire and, above all, the decision to organize a meeting between the military from both sides to ensure that the opposition is included in the mechanism for monitoring ceasefire violations.
Lebanon and Israel, still technically at war, began unprecedented talks on Wednesday to settle a maritime border dispute and clear the way for oil and gas exploration. The talks are being held at a UN peacekeeping force base in the Lebanese border town of Nakura and will focus exclusively on the disputed sea border. Lebanon hopes to continue exploring for oil and gas in a part of the Mediterranean that Israel also claims. The two countries will hold a second round of talks on October 28th. Lebanese citizens have reacted to the news regarding the talks with Israel under the auspices of the United Nations and the United States.
The negotiations with Israel will give some relief to Lebanon because it casts away the ghost of the war, fighting and destruction. Lebanon needs time to regain its strength and potential. We cannot keep on seeing our children live in this country. Of course we support the peace, as we do not want to spend our lives seeing our youth fighting in the south and dying. Let it happen, even if it was 100 years from now. We support the normalization, because at least you know that you live in peace. The agreement on maritime borders is not possible between us and the Zionists. The Zionist entity abused the Palestinian lands, therefore the Lebanese and Middle Eastern issue cannot be solved except if the Palestinian one was solved.
The Prime Minister of Japan will travel to Vietnam and Indonesia for 4 days from Sunday, according to a statement by the ruling Liberal Democratic Party. According to the text, Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga will meet with the Vietnamese Prime Minister in Hanoi and the Indonesian President Joko Widodo in Jakarta. Japanese Foreign Minister Toshimitsu Motegi stated that the visit represents a significant opportunity to address issues of global interest, including the situation in Southeast Asia regarding the management of the COVID-19 pandemic. He recalled that Vietnam is the chair of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations this year, and Indonesia is the country with the largest population belonging to the Group of 20, one of the major international forums for political and economic cooperation. This will be the first international tour of the new Japanese Prime Minister, who took office on September 16th after the resignation of Shinzo Abe for health reasons after almost 8 years in power. This Wednesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan threatened Greece over their energy dispute in the waters of the eastern Mediterranean.
We will continue to give Greece and the Greek Cypriot administration, who failed to keep their promises at the EU and NATO platforms, the answer they deserve on the ground.
And President Erdogan announced that the Yavuz ultra-deepwater drill ship would also return to the eastern Mediterranean after maintenance works at port. The Turkish president warned that plans that disregard the interests of Turkey and the breakaway of northern Cyprus would not succeed. And we've come to the end of this news brief, but remember you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And you can also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.